making port is a little different than making table wine. In a sense, we take the same high quality premium grapes of optimum maturity, bring them into the winery, get them crushed, and we start that same fermentation to metabolize the sugar into alcohol and carbon dioxide. And it's at some point in there that, in the traditional method, that unaged beverage brandy, grape brandy, is added to the fermentation, which kills the yeast, but it retains the natural grape sugar. So in all the ports that you taste that we make here, that sweetness comes from the sugar that was hanging on the vine when those specific grapes were harvested. And that's a traditional method that's been used for centuries in Portugal, of course. The term Ficklin is from the old world Viking. So there's a lot of history, I'm sure, there. But yeah, there's some Scandinavian in there and some Northern European, of course. But you know, it was the British and the Dutch traders who developed the port industry. So with my father's interest in wine and winemaking, as well as my grandfather's, the winery was founded back in September 1946. Some family grapes were planted, and my grandfather, Walter, handled sales and marketing. My father built the adobe brick building, all handmade bricks from local soil. Early winery, this is him building the adobe building. So yeah. And our first crush of Portuguese grape varietals was in 1948, and we still have wines in the cellar from 1948. This is the adobe building. It was built in 1947. So come on in. Let your eyes adjust a little bit. Now you may ask, why are we doing Portuguese grape varieties and doing ports? If you think about the history of the California wine industry, it was all inexpensive muscatels, ports, tokais, sherries. No one was in the premium segment at that time, and so the family decided to make ports using traditional Portuguese grape varieties as well as time-honored techniques. And the rest of the wine industry moved over to table wines, of course, through the years. And here we are still 77 years later making premium ports. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, the trade agreements mandated that you could no longer use port on the labels. Of course, all our labels are scrutinized by the government and approved for use here in the United States. So we have a tank in the back that has straight sides. It's a redwood tank, and what it is this is a tank that all of the wines that were made here during those early years, all of the wine went through this tank because it was easy to gauge with a given gallons per inch. In the corner is a little government office that was required by all bonded wineries during those early years. And of course then a locked room, the wine spirits storage room. And so during the early years of the winery, when we would need to do a brandy addition at harvest time to stop the fermentation, there needed to be a government agent on premise to be able to unlock the brandy room and oversee the amount of brandy that was used to fortify the new port, because they were quite concerned about bootlegging, and you were really presumed guilty until you could show that you were innocent, and that was a tough call with some of those gentlemen during the years. All the wine would go in there, the brandy was added, and so my father would call the ATF, and they would send an agent out, unlock the brandy room, and then monitor the amount of brandy that went in, the mixture, oversee the testing of the final alcohol on it, and then all that wine would new port would get pumped out into another tank, readying the tank for the next day's use. So once they approved things, they They enjoyed sitting in the government office and reading magazines and enjoying the daily news in the paper, of course. My father, he served in the military, you know, and was in France at the time of Normandy in World War II, and developed quite a love for wine. My father went to Davis and was a wine judge for the Sacramento State Fair, as well as you know, getting a degree in enology. And so I went to Davis too and had some of the same professors. You know, those are big shoes to fill. When we talk about types of port, there's, you know, the traditional ones, and I think a lot of people think of vintage ports. Vintage ports are from those exceptional years when the grapes and the lots of wine come together in just a splendiferous manner that you want to get them in the bottle when they're maybe 2.5 years old. And of course, it's a length in time in that bottle aging that really develops the character and the flavor of those vintage ports. The flavors that develop through the years are just beyond expectation. Ruby port, much more fruity, plummy, jammy kind of character. Dark, they go great with fresh fruit. Are bottled while they're young and intended to be used within a couple of years, you see. One of the most popular segments of port is tawny ports. Now, tawny describes nothing more than the color that the wine acquires with extended barrel aging. And so when we take a young wine and we bottle it for a vintage port, and we take some of that same wine and lay it down and put it in a barrel for 10, 20, 30 years, two entirely different sets of flavors develop from the difference between being aged in a bottle and aged in the wood for that long time. Now, of course, we use neutral barrels here, meaning we're not looking for wood influence, but we're looking for those signature flavors from each individual barrel after those extended period of time. So you'll develop some cognac warmth in the finish, some butterscotch, caramel, dried fruit flavors, and just this wonderful mouthfeel and finish in the tawny ports. So I started our aged 10-year tawny port with wines originally from 84 and 85. So it wasn't until the mid-90s that we started to release those wines with a minimum of 10 years of barrel age. Now here, there was a solera system, a fractional blending system we used for it. So the aged 10-year tawny that we still do today has a diminishing percentage of those wines from 84 and 85. The flagship port that we produce is the Old Vine Tinta. And the Old Vine Tinta is a port that was produced originally by my father with the solera system in the adobe cellar that dates back to the first wines that he produced back in 1948. We have barrels and puncheons over there. There's probably 250 barrels, and we go to each of those barrels and remove perhaps a quarter to a third of the wine in those and get that ready to bottle, you see. Once we've bottled that, then we'll take the 65 puncheons, the larger oak containers, and take the wine a similar percentage and refill, top up the barrels in that system. So in this bottle, in those barrels, in those puncheons, and in this glass is a diminishing percentage of wines from 1948, 1949, and on through the years. Back in here, we call this our wine library, and it's in here that we still have a number of barrels and puncheons for the Old Vine Tinta, that perfect port solera system, but at the same time, bins of bottles of older port. So in here, we still have some of the 1948 vintage Tinta Madeira port that were some of the first grapes to go through the crusher back in September of 1948. Our wine press that we still use today, you know, the wood offers a gentle press, breaking seeds down, and it's functioned very well through the years. So each of these barrels has a different wine in it, and you can kind of see from the color and the shape and the size, they're all different, and each barrel is expressing a signature on the wines that are in it. And so it gives a huge palette of flavors that we can paint with and develop the structure and the character of the wines that we're making for our wine club and for the retail markets, you see. We had a bourbon barrel Tawny that we did at one time. It was, I think, about 31 years old in an old Hiram Walker bourbon barrel. And that was a very popular wine that we did. The bourbon barrel Tawny right there, that's the one. So these are Tinta Madeira grapes, one of the Portuguese varieties that we still use. Here we go, more clusters. A few shot berries there, but nice, showing nice maturity. That's a nice cluster there. They have the bloom, the dust on them, that waxy characteristic on them. So, all's looking good. We do a lot of one-off things. We do a rosé port, and we were really the first to do this in a small quantity. And then, of course, the Portuguese said that they were starting to do it, but we know better than that. And a rosé port is lighter. It's that rosé, that beautiful rosé color. And the reason for that is because we don't spend a lot of time in fermentation with skin contact. Lighter notes of kiwi, of watermelon, strawberry, all those kind of things. And of course it's sweet, a little higher in alcohol. Ports, of course, are made in the 18 to 21% range. That's very traditional. And so this is a great starter port. It's one that if people aren't sure about whether they like port, they like this one. Wine is a cultural phenomenon that brings people together. It's family and friends. People want to take a nice bottle of wine as a hostess gift or a host gift. The gifting of wine is important. People enjoy sharing wine and being able to tell a story about it, give the people a wonderful experience tasting the wine, but also relate the story behind it. And so I think they like that. It's not just another bottle of wine off the shelf at the grocery store, but there's an experience involved.